All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and so glad to be talking to you on the Free for All. And I was really just looking at something on social media, which I'm going to discuss. I'm going to discuss kind of the obligations of progressive organizations to fight against the duopoly, whatever term you want to use, the corporate elites, the oligarchy, which is, I guess, a favored term by, AOC and Bernie in their tour. So the question that I was asking an organizer with a different group, but also a progressive group that I had my problems with, my issues with, not as many as my old group, Our Revolution, but DSA, was come on my program. Let's talk about what your duties are, what your obligations are. And I got a response, which I was surprised. I didn't think I would. And they are saying, I'm on vacation, but I will not. No, he is not. I thought he would. Well, okay, don't come on. I'll ask you to do it because I'll ask you to recommend someone because they're not going to come on. And I'm disappointed. It's so hard to get people. You can't get folks to come on board. And when you want to challenge their positions with respect to progressive organizing, if they're supporting Democrats, saying we got to do something else. This isn't working. And I can't get people to come on. I can't. And there's so many areas like this, right? Like if we agree, people will come on. For example, we had Kristen Grimm on, the mom for Medicare for All, Wednesday, and she's, happy to come on because we're going to agree. We see things the same way. Carlos is a great exception. Carlos and I have our disagreements. I showed you the recording that we did Wednesday evening, and that was where, when I prepared for that program, I actually thought I was going to disagree with Carlos, and he thought I was going to disagree with him. He came on, he thought I was going to disagree with him on the wisdom of reparations, and specifically whether I supported the bill that the Maryland Black Caucus together had, their caucuses don't actually submit bills. Individual delegates and senators in Maryland sponsor bills. So it wasn't really a Maryland Black Caucus sponsored bill, but the caucus was united in its support for reparations. And I have been very skeptical, and I remain skeptical of the strategy of pushing for reparations. But I've come around to the point, and I talked about this quite at length. I hope you'll check it out, Wednesday video, the 20th of May, that I would support the bill if I were in the House or in the Senate in Maryland, and I think that it should be passed because I don't like singling out any particular identity group, not a group of people that are collectively victimized by an action, right? By a corporate action. You buy a product and it blows up and it causes all sorts of damage. Well, if there's a bunch of people and they all suffer that same harm, yes, of course, collectively they should seek redress. Likewise, if a government policy caused harm to a particular neighborhood, the people who live in that neighborhood have every right, I believe, to band together if it was an illegal government action or was taken, contrary to some public policy. Go ahead together and sue. But when you have a very, very large group of people who have very different circumstances, who are enjoying very different circumstances, some doing extremely well, extremely affluent, powerful, privileged people, others doing very poorly, then I don't think it makes sense for them to necessarily seek redress together. And I think it makes even less sense for them to be the group, that the best remedy for the situation of those who are struggling within that group, who are suffering, is to have a collective remedy that includes beneficiaries who are doing well. So that's why I have an issue with the strategy of reparations. But when I think about it, the more I think about it, I'm like, well, okay, but this task force is designed to find who are the current victims of government policies, who are suffering now in the African American community in Maryland, who needs specific government help, and who can afford, right? Who can be the appropriate deep pocket for us to provide that kind of help to them. That to me does make sense, and I also think it would hope it would lead to demands from other groups and to an outcry by progressive organizations, that we have broad-based help, broad-based social programs, welfare programs for everyone in the state who is not does not have enough, is not adequately prepared to deal with life's problems. So that's how I would why I characterize a change in policy. But Carlos, great, he'll come on. We disagree. He has no problem with it. But so many people, especially when they work for, when their livelihood is based on supporting organizations, working for organizations that I believe are ultimately doing harm or may not be doing the kind of work that we need them to do. In this case, I believe progressive groups must unite to build an alternative to the Democratic Party. They just won't talk about it. They just refuse. They will not engage in that conversation, period. And it's almost impossible to get them to. And when you try to get them to, they'll back away. They'll make excuses. They'll say it's unrealistic. They just won't grapple with the ultimate corruption of the Democratic Party and how it is no longer in any way really a force for good. And I see this in not just in those who defend these quote progressive unquote organizations like DSA in this case, or Our Revolution, or Progressive Democrats of America, but also institutions that are perceived to be liberal, that are perceived to be honest, are perceived to have some integrity, like the New York Times. People just are there. They cannot wrap their arms around the fact that these groups are just, it's not just that maybe they're not perfect, maybe they got a few things wrong. They can't get their arms around the idea that these people who run these organizations don't have your best interests at heart, aren't prioritizing what's best for you. Or even if they are, they're lines they won't cross. They're simply not going to abandon the Democrats. They're simply not going to say, no, we need something different. Their livelihood is more important to them than doing what's right. And often it's not just livelihood, their privileges, their close relationship to people with power, their access, not their influence, but their access would be lost, and they just won't give it up. And I don't know what to do about that. I don't have an answer. To me, what's so obvious just isn't obvious to many other people, and I don't know what to do. I try to make things clear. Even when people say things like, well, Israel, I know you prioritize the genocide, and we need to focus on how bad things are in Israel and how bad our support for Israel is and how bad Israel is. And maybe that was for that reason alone, that's a reason to vote against or not to vote for Harris. But there's other things that matter too. And I'm like, yeah, but they're all implicated. It's not like you can separate. They all go together. People, it's so hard. We saw this too with Kristen on Wednesday, who I think is a wonderful person. She talked about how important love is, and she talked about the importance, why it's so necessary, it's so essential that we have Medicare for all. But in the end, she also said, yes, I believe our elected officials care about us. I believe the Democratic Party is on our side. And it's quite astonishing to see that cognitive dissonance, right? I mean, it's so obvious the Democratic Party isn't. They're not. She said it. Hey, when there's not an election year and when the Democrats don't have the majority, when when it's safe for them to support Medicare for all without risking, donation, contributions, financial help from for-profit healthcare, then some of them will actually feel like they can go ahead and support Medicare for all. But when push comes to shove, when House leadership is saying, nope, you can't be for this, and they're against it. So the evidence is so clear, so powerful, that these various organizations, these institutions don't have the integrity we need them to have, that they're not on our side, whether it's the Democratic Party, the progressive Democrats, whether it's these so-called progressive organizations, environmental groups that promote bad outcomes that endorse Kamala Harris even after she said she supports fracking? It's just too painful. It's too painful to think, no, I'm on my own. There are no friends. There are no allies in politics, in media. They're all in it for themselves. They're not trustworthy. Everything I read in the New York Times, it has to be subject to the utmost scrutiny. It's presented there for the effect it will have on me. Not to tell me the truth, not to help me make the best decisions I can make politically about my life. No, it's there because the owners, the managers, the financiers of this newspaper, of this organization, this is what they want me to think. They believe that if I think this, it will benefit them. And this is so painful. People just can't accept it. It's too hard. And I don't know what to do up against that kind of mindset. Jamie Raskin's my Congress member. I trust him. If he thinks impeaching Trump is a good idea, so do I. I trust him. I can't get by that. I don't know how to overcome that resistance, that reluctance, that block. And some would say, well, hell, you want us to believe you. You want us to to put our trust in you. And my answer is, hey, the second I say something that you think is BS, call BS. Say this isn't true. You're full of it, Hal. You don't know what you're talking about. Or you're doing it. And I hear this all the time. Well, your situation is different. You're privileged. You have this, you have that. What matters to you isn't as important to me. And I totally understand that. I want to get into, let's discuss it. But you can't even get these institutional people to talk about their institutions and why they do what they do and to be questioned and challenged. And when you try, now they won't come on my program also because it's just not enough reach. It doesn't. They're like, why should I waste my time? He'll just try to embarrass me and maybe go viral or something. That hurts me. I get nothing out of it. But if you watch videos of some of these organizational leaders, when they go on a more popular podcast where they're challenged, they just keep repeating the same talking points, whether it's Breonna Joy Gray, trying to get Jamal Bowman to acknowledge, hey, yeah, maybe we should have forced the vote. Can't do it. Just keep, well, you weren't nice to us. So why should we do what you're urging us to do? You called us out. You said we were sellouts. So why should we do what Jimmy Dore says when he's always attacking us? Well, as Breonna Joyce Gray says, because it's the right thing to do. But you can't get there. There's just simply, and if they're the leader of an organization, well, it's understandable. If you're the leader of our revolution, you don't want to admit that your entire policy, your entire strategy sucks. That trying to elect progressive Democrats makes things worse. That it prevents us from getting what we want. You probably don't want to admit yourself. You don't want to say, but why would you believe what somebody tells you when their interests clearly conflict with yours? Why do you have faith in them? Why do you have faith in these progressive leaders, so-called progressives? Because it's too painful to think they're scammers too. They're hustlers. It's too frightening. It's too upsetting. It's too destabilizing to think, hey, people I put my faith in, they don't really care about me. They don't really even care about what I want. They're putting themselves first. And I don't know how to persuade you. I don't know what to say because I've lost that. I just feel like it isn't working. I'd love to talk to you about this, though. 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. And I'm not saying the leaders of these organizations, what I mentioned, PDA or whatever, DSA, which I think is a little less bad. than some of the others. Our revolution. I'm not calling them scammers. I'm not calling them hustlers. If I said that, that's not what I mean. What I'm saying is you can't even question it. You can't. They don't want to think of themselves in any way. And they're not going to allow themselves to be put in a position where they have to defend or justify actions that have clearly had very, very poor consequences. All right, 240-242-5646. This New York Times, I call it despicable. I call what their use of the killing outside the Jewish Museum in D.C. Wednesday night, I call their use of that as to use it as an example in both a report, an actual news report, and an op-ed. I call that despicable to say that that's anti-Semitism. I think that's despicable. I think that's what they're using to justify, to manufacture consent for genocide. And I can't think of anything worse. And I don't know how, that action alone by the New York Times should cause people to be very, very skeptical of the newspaper going forward and say, yeah, if they do a news report and they tell me that a murder happened in the Bronx, I'm sure it did. If they're saying that Trump signed a bill, I'm sure he did. But the second they start to give their opinions, got to start being very, very skeptical, very dubious. This doesn't, does it smell right or doesn't it? Has the New York Times been honest with me on this issue, or has it been consistently dishonest? Those are the questions you got to ask yourself over and over and over again. And I have really I don't know how to answer them. I don't know how to get people to be willing to say, no, this newspaper isn't what I believed it to be. And tropes, or what word am I looking for? Sort of homilies like, well, they don't deliberately lie. I mean, what does that matter? Who knows? Maybe they're lying to you. Maybe they really believe their propaganda. Does it really matter? Whatever it is, what they're doing is wrong. It's harmful. It's dishonest. All right, please subscribe. Please click like. 240-242-5646. You can see the news from Gaza is unremittingly grim. Another 60 Palestinians killed Thursday. Death tolls over 53,800. That's the official count. And I'm, by the way, I don't exempt myself from people who delude themselves, who try to believe that everything isn't, when it comes to people in power, when it comes to people with influence, that it isn't as bad, that there are some decent quality people out there. I really, that, or at least that there may be lights at the end of the tunnel that aren't an onrushing train. I mean, I think we all, look, I really wanted to believe when we had that ceasefire for the first couple of months of the Trump administration that it might continue, that really Trump was going to let Bibi know you can't kill Palestinians with impunity. You can't do it. I really hoped that would be the case. I wanted to believe it so badly. Well, it wasn't true. It was just simply not true. 53,822 identified Gazans. And even if it is true, because Trump said some things where I'm like, okay, well, maybe there's some humanity there. He said, I want people not to die. When he was talking about the Ukraine war, the Democratic line has always been, well, we have to stop Putin. We're willing to sacrifice the last Ukrainian to stop Putin, right? That's the Democratic line. Totally inhumane, totally anti-life, and totally contrary to the best interests of our country. That's what the Democrats have argued. Trump said some things that made me think, well, maybe he really does care a little bit about people. I want people not to die was his explanation for why he was going to push for peace with Putin. And I was like, okay, I can believe that. I mean, that seems reasonable. And I hoped, of course, I didn't vote for Trump. So many of his policies are so bad. He's clearly extraordinarily corrupt and dishonest. But I wanted to think, well, maybe there's some good there. So, yeah, I delude myself too. 167 deaths in Israel, by Israel, in Gaza, Wednesday, Thursday. That's where we are. And two more, two people killed in Washington, D.C., and I would say they're casualties of the Israeli, two more casualties of the Israeli genocide. That's not what you'd certainly get from the media, not from the so-called liberal media, the progressive, the New York Times. Oh no, they're victims of anti-Semitism. That's the real problem we've got to deal with, according to the New York Times. Well, maybe because so many of your readers, I could be wrong, are affluent. Many of them are Jewish, affluent Jewish people. I was talking to somebody, an activist yesterday when I was downtown, and I think they are Jewish. They are Jewish. And we were talking about this. And we were saying, there's so many pro-Palestine Jews. We go to these events. We talk to Congress members or their staffers anyway, maybe not the Congress members, but the staffers. We go to protests, rallies, parades, what have you. And we see a lot of Jewish people. And we're like, yeah, the Jewish community is clearly not lined up in step behind Israel. That's, one of the takeaways you want to get, and I'm Jewish. But we were saying no. But you know what? You talk to most Jews, they're for Israel. They're just simply not prepared to accept that they're co-religionists or genociders. They just can't accept it. It's too painful. They can't say, you know what? These are Nazis. Those Israelis who are behind this, those who are pressuring Trump, they're Nazis. Pressured Biden. It's too painful. And honestly, I don't get it. You are what you are. It doesn't mean anything to me. It pisses me off a lot of times, but I'm not going to deny it or pretend it isn't true or think, well, you know what? They're Jewish, I'm Jewish, so what they're doing can't be that bad. But I know a lot of people think just that way. All right, this is from CNN. There's the couple. There's the lovely fiancéed couple that were killed in this outside the Jewish Museum. It's very sad, obviously. They're obviously casualties. I thought this headline, this is from CNN, their video, I'll play in a second. Video appears. Let me see if I can just give you that. I'd rather show you the headline real quick, then we'll play the video. This is a very strange, and we're going to talk a little bit about how these headlines are also designed to manufacture consent, to make you think something that isn't true. So video appears to show DC shooting suspect arrested yelling, "Free, free Palestine." All right, let's play that video and we'll see, is that what it appears to show? Is that the takeaway, that this video appears to show the shooter yelling, "Free, free Palestine"? And then if that isn't what it appears to show, we'll talk about why that's the word used in that headline.
Sarah Milgram and Yaron Lashinsky, two Israeli embassy employees, were shot dead in Washington, D.C. on Wednesday night. Eyewitness video obtained by CNN appears to show the suspect in the deadly shooting as he's taken into custody.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Now, did that appear to be the suspect shouting, "Free, free Palestine"? Or was it quite simply the suspect shouting, "Free, free Palestine"? Now, I understand you use the word appear when something's not obvious. Well, it appears to be, like it was like, then maybe that would appear to be him shouting, "Free, free Palestine," right? But I don't think there's anything apparent. I think it's just obvious. I think this is just clear. This is what he is saying, is it not?
Taken into custody.
Free, free Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Washington Metropolitan Police has identified the suspect as 30-year-old Elias Rodriguez from Chicago. The shooting happened near the Capitol Jewish Museum.
Prior to the shooting, the suspect was observed pacing back and forth outside of the museum. He approached a group of 4 people, produced a handgun, and opened fire, striking both of our decedents.
Police say the suspect then went inside the museum, where he was arrested soon after.
All right, thanks for that video from CNN. And let me get myself back up full screen. Just trying to respond to Ari. He had a question in the chat. Why were my previous comments removed? And the only thing I can think of is if I had to remove a video because of some technical issue or there was something incorrect and then re-uploaded the recording, because I record everything. I have a recording and then I have the video that I stream. And usually I just leave the live stream up. If you comment on the live stream or you chat in the live stream and then for some reason I have to take the live stream down, unfortunately we lose the chat. So that could be the only reason that I can think of. When I upload a video from a recording as opposed to the live stream that has chat remarks, the uploaded version, the copy, if you will, that's not going to have your comments in it in the chat. That's the only answer I have. But it's a good question because I know people get frustrated. That's why I don't like to, if I can possibly rehabilitate or salvage a live stream, I try to do that so I don't lose any of the comments that are in them. All right, 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. And he said, free Palestine. He said it. He said it twice. There's no doubt about it. There's no apparent question. It's just what he said. So why would you use the word appears? Why wouldn't you just say suspect shouts free Palestine when he's arrested? Why wouldn't you say that? Why would you have to use the qualifier appears? And the answer is, if you are presenting a narrative that the shooting wasn't because of Israel, the shooting wasn't motivated by anger, by wholly justifiable, completely understandable rage at the murders, the ongoing war crime, the pogroms by Israel. Now, I'm not saying that makes it okay. I'm not saying, oh, well, yeah, because of what Israel's doing, you get to kill people who work for the Israeli embassy. No, I don't think you do. I don't think it makes it okay. He did commit a crime. He committed murder, right? These are not people who in any way particularly, specifically, were threatening him. So, assuming he shot them in cold blood right outside, he was lying in wait, yeah, it was murder. But it's not anti-Semitism. Not if you're shouting free Palestine. You're motivated by the extraordinary sense of powerlessness coupled with bottomless rage at the crime, the evil of the Israeli government, the Israeli military, specifically the Israeli prime minister, and frankly, the U.S. government as well, the U.S. presidents. That's not anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism, you hate Jews because they're Jewish. If he had said, kill all the Jews, if he had said Hitler was right, then I'd be like, okay, yeah, it's anti-Semitism. Now, even if it was anti-Semitism, okay, it's anti-Semitism, but I would say, well, I understand why, and I'm Jewish, I get it. I'm a victim of I could be a victim of anti-Semitism too, which is one of the reasons I'm so, well, it's a very, very tiny little reason that I'm so bitter and angry at Israel. It's one of them. But basically, I just am angry because they kill people, innocent people, children, with zero remorse. And then they try to justify it. Oh, well, they're anti-Semitic. They'll grow up to hate us and want to kill us. Yeah, probably. The New York Times, totally dishonest here. Slaying outside DC Jewish Museum as part of global surge. So look, they're going to go through this article and they're going to say, look, there's all this anti-Semitism since 2023. And why? Well, the Hamas attack and the subsequent war, not the subsequent genocide, not the cruelty, the bottomless cruelty of the Israeli government might, and I think it does, cause some people to hate Jews. I'm sure that's true. But that's not what they're saying. They're saying, oh, it was the attack. It was the fact that Jews were attacked that people hate Jews. This is a complete lie. That is a crock. In fact, what we see is when people are attacked, they tend to be, not always, but they tend to get more goodwill rather than less. Remember when the U.S. was attacked on 9/11? And many have said, and I think at that time, and correctly so, yeah, the U.S. was in fact an exporter of violence. And we certainly are even more so now. But at that time, the U.S. is exporting violence. The U.S. is committing crimes against the world. Remember what the Reverend said from Chicago? He said the chickens have come home to roost. And there was something very, very true about that. Our corporations, our military has killed, and at that point, I mean, we've killed so many more since then. But we were responsible for, over the past 40 years. In 2001, you go back to Vietnam, millions of deaths around the world. Directly our military. We had toppled democracies and installed tyrants because they were good for our businesses. So the phrase, the chickens have come home to roost, America is now a victim itself of the same kind of violence and terror that we perpetrated around the world, that we are ourselves victims, was fair. It was accurate. It was a correct assessment of the 9/11 attack. But it was also, it led to a lot of anger. But despite the fact that the U.S., to a very significant degree, the Bush administration brought this upon, our government brought this on us. That was the Reverend Jeremiah Wright. I was just looking that up. Worldwide, there was tremendous sympathy for the U.S. in Tehran, a country that was victimized in Tehran, Iran, a part of, the capital of a country that we had done terrible damage to through overturning its democratic government in the 50s and then installing the Shah, who tortured people, had torture rooms. There was great sympathy for us in Tehran. There were vigils. Well, Israel could have also enjoyed a bit of a honeymoon period, a little phase, except that it immediately, without even pausing, used the October 7 to begin in earnest a truly genocidal campaign against Palestine, which it has not stopped. So that is what is causing the surge in anti-Semitism, if there is one indeed. And if you look at the actual examples they give, they're pretty damn weak. Again, it's not anti-Semitism. It's anger at Israel. It's anti-Israeli. It's anti-Zionism. New York Times can't admit that, can't acknowledge that, won't. It refuses to. Now, if you read the article, and what the Times does that I find very frustrating is they have these provocative BS headlines like, oh, this is part, right? That the killing, oh, there's all this global anti-Semitism. Of no wonder Israel has to go kill all those people because there's anti-Semitism. They're probably anti-Semitic. But if you read the article, what the New York Times does is they put in a few caveats in their text so that, oh, well, look, no, see, they're being on. You say they're so bad. You say the New York Times is so terrible. You point out, well, they claim that the killing was anti-Semitic. But then, well, read the article. Look, they even acknowledge it's difficult to determine what's anti-Semitic. Maybe it really is. It's hard to know. Well, if it's hard to know, why do you call it anti-Semitic in your friggin' headline? And especially it's hard to know because of the humanitarian impact of Israel's conduct in the war. Talk about antiseptic verbiage, the humanitarian impact. You mean killing tens of thousands of children, mostly innocent men, women, and children, virtually all, putting bullets in the head of little kids? Is that the humanitarian impact? Maybe you should be more specific about what you're talking about it. Or you talk about, oh, these are complex issues. You know, there were some pretty legitimate, maybe, protests on college campuses, but there was also abusive or hateful incidents. Which were they? Because I didn't see any. The only, at least none from the pro-Palestine side. I saw Israeli pro-Israel, probably Jewish thugs with 2x4 smacking people in the head. That seemed abusive and hateful to me. I don't know what else you're talking about. Wasn't there like there was a chemical attack at Columbia University by an Israeli student or a former IDF, Israeli military veteran, used a chemical attack on a Palestinian? That was abusive or hateful. I know there was a woman at Yale who faked pro-Israel protester who faked getting hit in the eye with a pole. But I don't know, what are you talking about? Because I would love the examples. I would love the examples. And they do give some. I'm not going to go through all of them. This is worldwide, but here's just this. 2 cars exploded outside the Beth Yaakov synagogue in La Grande Motte. Was an act of terrorism. Terrorism isn't necessarily anti-Semitism. Right? This is supposed to be about these clear examples of anti-Semitism. Maybe it was, I don't know. And then these are examples of the anti-Semitism around the world. And in the US, the home of Josh Shapiro was firebombed. Now, the suspect, we want to call that anti-Semitism. You say, well, I hate that Jewish guy. You got to kill him. No, he's angry at the way Israel treats Palestinians. I was looking at Shapiro's record. Shapiro is not, some ardent, aggressive, in-your-face, Fetterman-style Zionist. He has said he favors a 2-state solution. That's obviously no solution at all. There needs to be one state, one free state where all are equal from the river to the sea. All have political rights. All have economic justice. That's a solution, not some bogus 2-state like a Pakistan, India, which is a recipe for endless war. So, no, Shapiro, I don't think he's serious about wanting true peace, but his current views aren't particularly, or at least relatively, less egregious than many others. But that doesn't mean the attack was anti-Semitic. And again, I tend to believe people. They say, well, I did it because of the way Israel treats Palestine. I believe them. I think that's why you're doing it. I saw this headline, just again, the New York Times, absolutely a despicable newspaper. It really is. It is. And one of the reasons I would say that is because they're people, they're writers, they're editors. These are smart people. These are elite. These are the top, right? I mean, that's the plum. You're in the best newspaper in the world, the most powerful, the most influential. You could really be a force for good, right? And instead, you use your power, you use your influence to cape for Israel, to protect Israel. Because it's in your best interest. This is what I say. They're not friends. They're not allies of the truth. They're not trying to present you with the information you need to make a smart decision about politics, about the way you live your life, about who to support, whom not to support. No. They're there to manufacture consent. for the worst crime that humans are capable of. So there's this op-ed guest. I read this. Well, yeah. I don't think that, by the way, this guest essay is clearly BS. The killing, I understand the victim, the man, I don't even think was Jewish. There's some question about that. Was his family? He may be Yaron, I think is his name. It sounds like such a Jewish name. I was so sure he must be Jewish. But the Daily News columnist, Sean King, says he's not Jewish. And my wife was talking about this, and she said apparently he's not Jewish. So he's not even conflating Jews and Israel. I guess the writer would say, well, he thought he was Jewish. He came out of the Jewish museum, so he must be Jewish, would be the rationale of the shooter. But the shooter didn't shoot him because he's Jewish. The shooter shot him because he's associated, or as far as we can tell, the language was free Palestine. Now some are saying, well, we don't know. He may not have known he was with the Israeli embassy. Maybe not, but he was. The two victims are both affiliated with, as I understand, both employees of the Israeli government. So I guess we shouldn't assume that they were shot because they were Jewish, especially when because the shooter thought they were Jewish, especially when his exact words were free Palestine, meaning I'm responding to the Nakba. I'm responding to the genocide. I'm responding to the ongoing pogrom. And I read this and I thought, well, maybe this is a really good article, this essay, because maybe what they're saying is because of what the ADL, Anti-Defamation League, does, because of what Israel and its Hasbara, which always is saying over and over and over, if you criticize Israel, you're anti-Semitic. If you say anything negative about Israel, you're anti-Semitic. If you compare Israel to the Nazis, that's supposedly anti-Semitic, even though Israel is guilty of genocide just like the Nazis were guilty of genocide. Even though many Holocaust survivors have said, yes, this is what we saw. There aren't that many left, but a few of them have said, I shouldn't say many, a few have said, yeah, what we're seeing, what Israel does now is what the Nazis did when I was a little girl, when I was a little boy. It's the same thing. But if you say that, according to the Israeli lobby, according to AIPAC, you're anti-Semitic. So, yeah, I think you could make the argument that the Jew hatred that we may be seeing is based in part because largely, if it's even there, because Israel insists that if you criticize Israel, if you're angry at Israel, you must be anti-Semitic. Well, okay, people say, okay, well, I am angry at Israel, and so therefore I must be anti-Semitic. But that's not the point. The article is saying the real problem is that there are all these bigots out there who say, well, Israel is really bad, and so therefore Jews are bad. But no, we shouldn't do that. We shouldn't do that. We shouldn't assume that because you're Jewish, you support what Israel's doing. I'm very confused by all of that. I guess what the writer is saying is you can be a little bit angry at Israel, but you shouldn't blame Jewish people for what Israel's doing. The problem is it's Israel that has made the point. It's Israel that claims you can't criticize it or you're anti-Semitic. Now, this writer, why doesn't the New York Times why isn't there one pro-Palestine article in this paper? Why don't they ever criticize Israel? A full-throated condemnation of Israel. You just don't have it. There's no one. There's not one. There's no Mehdi Hassan. There's no Joy-Ann Reid. I mean, as bad as MSNBC is, there was more criticism of Israel on MSNBC than in the pages of the New York Times. They just won't do it. There's Bret Stephens, who's just an unabashed Israel defender. David French, unabashed Israel defender. Michelle Goldberg will, fret a little bit about the victims, but that's about it. Same with Jamel Bowie. So the evidence that we're somehow conflating Jews and Israel. he was a pro-Palestinian activist, the shooter. Doesn't that suggest it wasn't anti-Semitism? Doesn't that suggest he wasn't conflating Jews and Israel? He was saying, no, you work for Israel. You work at the embassy. Now, maybe he didn't. Maybe he was a pro-Palestinian guy who just waited around outside a Jewish museum and decided to kill people. Kind of odd. It's kind of ironic, I guess, that he managed to kill 2 Israel employees. But even if it's true that it was a random targeting of people at a Jewish museum, it's because he, the killer, the shooter, bought the Israeli propaganda, the ADL propaganda, that Israel and Jews are the same, one and the same. Well, I don't believe that's what happened. But if you want to take that position, then blame Israel. Blame ADL for saying that Jews and Israel are the same and Jews have to support Israel at all costs. Now, he's saying that this goal was to bully Jews out of the public square. No, it was to stop killing, to stop the genocide. Now, was it going to be effective or successful? No, but that was obviously what they wanted. 240-242-5646. So this op-ed is just so utterly absurd, and I don't have that. I'm going to get you the name of the person who wrote it. He's some kind of Israeli. He's an Israeli. Why don't you have some Palestinians write for you? Where the hell are they? There's a time and place for political protest, including, of course, both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian debate. Was there a time and place for protests against Nazi Germany? Like, maybe you don't do it outside like a German-American Bund meeting? Is that what their point is? What are both sides of the Israeli-Palestinian debate? Genocide's okay? No, it's not? Those are the two sides? Yes, anti-Zionist rhetoric can inspire deadly consequences. No, it's Zionism when it's genocidal that inspired. In fact, it doesn't even inspire. It is, in fact, deadly. What we've seen, I hate to say this, I used to consider myself a Zionist, which, as I understand it, means you believe in the Jewish state. You believe that Jews should have their own country. Right? That's what Zionism is. But that's a problem because there's no place where there's no one else. So if you're going to have a Jewish state, what about the people in that state who aren't Jewish? What happens to them? What's their right? What's their power? I don't believe in that stuff. I don't believe in Christian states or maybe the Vatican. I don't believe in, no, we're human beings. We live in the same region. We're all part of the same country. We all have the same rights, period. End of story. No further discussion. And then, well, what about the Saudis? It's a Muslim country. Yeah, and that's a huge problem. Those theocracies are a terrible problem. But even so, countries like Iraq, Libya, before we destroyed them, Lebanon, they did have vibrant Jewish communities. And the people there, at least in the secular ones, they were Jewish. They had the same rights. Iran, vibrant Jewish community. Morocco, vibrant Jewish community. You can't, theocracy don't work. It's not the anti-Zionist rhetoric I guess it could, right? You know, you say this is what Israel's doing, it's going to piss people off. But you don't blame the rhetoric, you got to blame the underlying crime that instigated, that motivated the killer. If you want to look at, if you care about motives, if you care about reason, then you say, well, yeah, you don't get to kill people, but at the same time, let's understand the context. And maybe we stop killing Palestinians so we don't have more people, more semi-innocent victims. I just want to get to that point finally. Was he innocent? Were they innocent, those two employees? Apparently, they're being described as pro-peace, as having tried to work together to bring Jews and Palestinians together, Israelis and Palestinians together. That's good. That's nice. I like that. It's unfortunate that innocent people, good people, are often casualties of injustice, right? All the time. The people, all those thousands, tens of thousands of innocent children, women, and men who are innocent victims in Gaza. It's terrible. And now maybe these two are victims as well, innocent victims as well. But I question how innocent they really are. Oh, we'll get to that Guardian article in just a second, Jews for Palestine. I question it because, and here's why I say that. And even, look, nobody's truly innocent. Just because you do some things that make you less than innocent doesn't mean you're, you deserve to be killed. I don't believe that. But they chose to work for a genocidal state. That's the bottom line. They worked for a country that is committing mass murder, that is responsible for war crimes. They made that conscious choice. So I reject the term innocent. I don't believe that's the right term. I wouldn't call someone who worked for the German embassy in 1941 in D.C. innocent. You chose to work for them. Now, if you make the argument, well, they're entrapped too, like a German maybe has to work for the Nazis or they'll get killed. I don't know. But you're not, you don't have to. You're in D.C. The man who was killed is German. He didn't have to work for Israel. And even if you're Israeli, you're not going to get killed if you don't work for Israel. So they made a choice. They made a very, very bad choice. They made a choice to work for a genocidal state. Now, that doesn't mean it's okay to kill them. I'm not saying that. I want to be very, very clear. But I also don't want the term innocent to be used for people who work for Israel, because they're not. They know. They know. The author of that piece we were just talking about, let me just give it to you. So their name is Naftali Shavelson. Let me just put that up there so you can see it. Why? I find this really just, again, where are the voices of Palestine in the New York Times? Maybe they're there. I'm not aware of it. Okay, there it is. Naftali Shavelson, media director of the Consulate General of Israel in New York. Media director. So where does that make him? It makes him a propagandist. He's trying to get you to demonize, not just to be angry or critical of somebody who killed two people in D.C., but to view them as some kind of monster, totally hinged from humanity. That's the Israeli goal. So we don't see Palestinians as the victims of Israel. And here, the goal is, hey, you can be angry at Israel, you can criticize Israel, but it's not all Jews. Not all Jews. And I agree, it isn't. Of course. But Israel's responsible for the belief that Jews themselves are the same as Zionism. And if you want proof of that, so here's that article I referenced in the Guardian. The head of the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, right? The ultimate purveyor, the ultimate weaponizer of of anti-Semitism, alleged anti-Semitism, the ultimate weaponizer of alleged anti-Semitism. Anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. You criticize Israel, you hate Jews. That's the bottom line. You criticize Israel, you hate Jews. So anything anybody says against Israel, that's what causes murder. That's what Shavelson wants you to believe. You know, it's amazing, because what Shavelson says is that the goal, the terror, the goal of the shooter was to bully Jews. That's his exact words, to bully Jews out of the public square. But what Shavelson is trying to do, and what Jonathan Greenblatt from ADL is trying to do, is to say, if you criticize Israel, you're guilty of murder. Your anti-Zionism is what leads to murder. That's bullying. That's shaming. That's disgraceful. That's despicable to even be in the newspaper, that we cannot criticize, or at least present a counter argument. We can't criticize Israel without being responsible somehow for mass murder, or for, well, in this case, multiple killing. 2 people killed, 2 young people killed, who, at least according to media reports, which again are very, sketchy. Can we believe? I don't know. We're actually working for peace. I saw this, moving on to another topic, and I mentioned DSA, and I asked this guy who wrote this, you don't see his name, I said, hey, come on my program, let's talk about this. No, I'm not going to do it. So they wrote about they want people to rejoin DSA to fight for a better organization, country, and world. And apparently DSA is having a lot of trouble. They're not getting people. So I responded, because I'm really mad at DSA, because not completely DSA, but I'm angry at them because I think they have been more progressive in the past, but they won't break with the Democrat Party. They won't call for an alternative. They won't demand that we support, that we build a Green Party alternative or some other alternative. And this particular DSA guy actually campaigned for Harris. And I tried to get them on my program to talk about that. They wouldn't do it. So I asked, I'm like, you want people to join DSA? So I asked a question in totally good faith, because I wanted to know. I don't know. Are you promoting an alternative to Democrats, or even better, Dem abandoned? Your group is having trouble getting new members. You're losing membership. Here's why. Since many DSA folks campaign for crony capitalism, now they're supposed to be DSA, right? Democratic Socialists of America. Since many DSA folks campaign for crony capitalist militarist Kamala Harris, there's understandable skepticism with respect to DSA's integrity. This is the problem. So you want us to join your group, or you want people to rejoin? Are you promoting an alternative? Because that's what we need. And the response is okay. So I asked a question, are you promoting an alternative? And there's no answer. Okay. So I assume, well, if you won't answer my question, I assume that you're not proposing an alternative. As in, no, we are at bottom loyal Democrats, and we will so remain. It doesn't matter how tightly they embrace Israel, no matter how transparently phony their embrace of Medicare for all Democrats may be, and no matter how badly the Congressional Progressive Democratic Caucus portrays their movement, we're still Democrats. That was my. Now, I didn't know that was where I was going to come out. I thought maybe they'll answer and say, yeah, to be honest with you, we are discussing this. We aren't so sure we support Democrats. We aren't so sure that we don't have to build something different. And that was incredibly frustrating. So I say, hey, come on my program. Let's talk about this. Let's answer. Let's figure out what your obligations are. What you should or shouldn't be doing. And there's just, crickets. Or no, I'm sure you can find somebody else. Well, who? Who else? Who else can I get? Because I'd like to know. And they, again, went after me. So their response is, well, you were at our revolution. And they were doing Democratic Party building work. So Why don't you ask our revolution? I would focus more on that than specious reasoning about DSA when it didn't back Harris. And I responded, I've asked and continue to ask OR leadership these and similar questions whenever possible. So, no, I don't exempt my group at all. And I actually resigned when it was clear that I was going to act as a sheepdog for the party. Then I say, what if anything is specious? Well, they're claiming it's specious because DSA didn't back Harris. No, but DSA leaders did back Harris. DSA leaders did try to get people to support Harris. And they are going to be associated with Harris. And then there was this comment, which I actually thought was very interesting and I want to get to. And that's what really, I'm like, join, come on board, let's talk about this. A broad-based party doesn't spring from a proclamation. This is not from my comment, the original poster. It's true that a party that unites the broad left has to start somewhere. And they're saying it's not the Democrats. I suggest it start with social movements as conditions force them to become more political, but there's no one simple reason for the ties social movements have, like DSA, like our revolution. There's no simple reason. It ain't all about corruption. And I agree, it isn't all about corruption. I think there are many other explanations as well. Institutional inertia. Hey, we talk to these people, they talk to us. This is what we do, so we're going to keep doing it. Or, at one point they were on our side again, so we thought they were. So we're just going to, this is sort of the direction we move, and this is how we organize. Or even we talk to them, so we feel like we have some impact, and you're confusing access with influence. So that's not necessarily corrupt. It becomes corrupt when this is our vehicle for fundraising. This is our vehicle for getting invited to cocktail parties. That's when it becomes corrupt. So I agree, it's not necessarily. And I didn't say that. I just said, hey, your integrity is called into question when you campaign for bad people. And you don't demand anything in return. You don't get anything in return. That was my point. And I find it, again, so frustrating, so disappointing that it's impossible to have debates, discussions, conversations with these people. All right, that's going to do it. I actually wanted to talk a little bit, or I have in the deck, tariffs. Democratic Party apologists, progressives continue to completely misunderstand tariffs and why we need tariffs, even if Trump's implementation of them is particularly, corrupt and not well thought out, not well organized. But still, we do need tariffs. I'll be back Monday, even though it is Memorial Day. Have a great weekend.